Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction inspired by the title. This massage uncovered a truth I wasn't ready for. Family secrets revealed. While it may touch on sensitive family and emotional topics, all characters, events, and situations are products of imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events, is purely coincidental. This narrative is intended for mature audiences in the USA and aims to explore human emotions, relationships, and the complexities of hidden truths. Reader discretion is advised. It was one of those chilly Saturday mornings when the air felt heavier than usual, as if it knew something I didn't. I had been carrying the weight of stress for weeks, work deadlines pressing against my skull, my sleep broken into restless fragments, and the lingering ache in my shoulders that no amount of hot tea or stretching seemed to fix. The house was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own thoughts louder than you want to. I was scrolling mindlessly through my phone, trying to distract myself from the gnawing tension, when my cousin, Melissa, called. She had a warm, almost sing-song voice, the kind that made everything she said sound like an invitation. "You've been wound up like a spring lately," she teased. "I'm sending someone over. You need a massage on me." I laughed, but a part of me felt oddly resistant. I'd never been one to accept help easily, especially when it came from family. Still, Melissa had this way of making refusal feel impossible. By noon, I was straightening the throw pillows on the couch, pacing the living room in a nervous rhythm. I couldn't figure out why I felt this odd anticipation. It was just a massage, nothing more. Maybe it was because I hadn't had one in years, or maybe because the idea of a stranger's hands on me felt personal. My mind kept drifting to my mother's old advice. Trust is a fragile thing. Once given, it's not easy to take back. I didn't know why that thought stuck with me that morning. When the knock finally came at the door, I wasn't prepared for the figure standing there. It wasn't some spa professional in a crisp uniform, but someone familiar, too familiar. "Hey," the voice said softly, with a half-smile that sent a ripple of something unnameable through me. It was Daniel, a relative I hadn't seen in years. We weren't close, but there was a complicated history there, the kind of history families tend to bury under layers of polite small talk and holiday photos. "I didn't know you did this," I said, stepping aside to let him in. He shrugged, setting down his bag of oils and towels. "I've been certified for a while now." Melissa thought I could help. His tone was casual, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker that made me both curious and uneasy. As he began setting up the massage table in my living room, I found myself caught between two thoughts. This could be exactly what I need to relax, and why does this feel like the beginning of something I can't control? I didn't know it then, but that morning the stillness, the familiar face, the quiet undercurrent of unspoken history, was the first ripple in a wave that would pull me under. The massage wasn't going to just ease my tension. It was going to open a door I didn't even know was locked, leading straight into the kind of truth that changes everything. Melissa had always been the type to give thoughtful gifts, never the generic scented candle or a gift card, but something that somehow felt perfectly timed for the moment you were living. So when she arranged this massage, I told myself it was just her way of caring for me. That's all it was. A kind gesture. Nothing more. Still, as Daniel adjusted the height of the massage table and unfolded crisp white sheets over it, I couldn't ignore the faint awkwardness hanging between us. The last time we had been in the same room, it had been at a family gathering years ago, where polite smiles had covered for the unspoken distance between us. He wasn't someone I thought of often, but now here he was in my living room, with a calmness that felt both professional and strangely personal. "Melissa really thinks you need this," he said, pouring oil into his palm and rubbing his hands together to warm it. "She said you've been stressed for months." I chuckled lightly, trying to break the tension. "You could say that. Life's been a lot lately." He nodded, as though he understood more than I was telling him. "Well then, today's about letting it go. Just breathe." His voice carried a kind of quiet reassurance that I wasn't expecting. I lay down on the table, my cheek pressing into the face cradle, breathing in the faint scent of eucalyptus. The first touch was deliberate but gentle, a slow glide over my shoulders that sent a wave of relief down my spine. I exhaled, realizing how tightly I'd been holding my muscles, almost as if my body had been bracing for something all this time. "This is nice," I murmured. "It's just the beginning," Daniel replied softly. There was something comforting about the rhythm of his hands, steady, sure, and familiar in a way I couldn't quite explain. It didn't feel like a stranger's touch. And that was the part one couldn't wrap my head around. As the minutes passed, my thoughts began to drift. My guard loosened, and for the first time in weeks, my mind wasn't racing with to-do lists or deadlines. I remembered summers from years ago, family barbecues where Daniel had been quieter than the rest of the cousins, often standing off to the side. He was always polite, but never fully there, as if carrying his own invisible weight. Now, with each movement of his hands, I wondered what he had been through since then. And, without knowing why, I began to sense that this massage wasn't only about helping me relax. There was something deeper at play, something hidden beneath this gift. I wanted to believe Melissa had simply been thoughtful. I wanted to believe Daniel's presence was purely coincidence. But as the room filled with the sound of my own steady breathing and the soft glide of oil over skin, an uneasy feeling began to bloom in my chest, like a whisper I couldn't quite hear yet, warning me that this was the start of something I wasn't ready to face. The first real sweep of Daniel's hands across my back carried a strange kind of weight, not physical, but emotional. It was as if the touch itself was layered, carrying something unspoken. My skin prickled, though the room was warm. The oil slid smoothly, and the firm pressure on my shoulders made me sigh involuntarily. "This is where you hold most of your stress," he murmured, his voice close to my ear, but softened by the hum of concentration. "I know," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "Feels like I've been carrying the world back there." His hands slowed over a knot in my upper back, lingering there, working with a patience that felt personal. I told myself it was just a professional technique, nothing more. But there was something about the way his fingertips seemed to pause, almost memorizing the shape of me, that made my chest tighten. The silence between us was thick but not uncomfortable, at least, not at first. I listened to the steady rhythm of his movements, the faint creak of the table beneath me, and my own breathing growing slower, heavier. But then something unexpected happened. As he worked down the length of my spine, a flicker of recognition stirred inside me. Not a memory exactly, more like a sensation I had felt before, long ago. It was faint, elusive, like trying to remember a dream that slips away when you wake up. I focused on the sound of the oil being warmed in his palms, the subtle heat of his hands, and yet my mind kept circling back to that feeling. "I know this." "Are you okay?" he asked suddenly, as if sensing my shift in mood. "Yeah," I said quickly, forcing a small laugh. "Just thinking." He didn't press. Instead, he continued with slow, deliberate strokes, moving toward my lower back. I should have been sinking into relaxation, but instead my mind was sharpening, scanning my memories for an explanation. There was a comfort in his touch, yes, but also a familiarity I couldn't explain away. It wasn't just that we were related, or that I had seen him at family events. It was something deeper, older, like this wasn't the first time he had touched me in this way. I tried to dismiss the thought. Maybe I was overthinking, letting my imagination run wild because I'd been under so much stress. But the unease crept in anyway, threading through the warmth of the moment, turning it into something layered with questions. That was the thing about touch, it could heal, or it could awaken something you didn't even know was buried inside you. And as Daniel's hands moved across my skin, I had the growing, sinking feeling that I was about to remember something I wasn't ready to know. The deeper Daniel's hands worked into my muscles, the more my mind began to slip away from the present moment. At first, it was subtle, a random image, a fragment of sound. But then, as his thumb pressed into the base of my neck, a rush of heat surged through my body, and an image snapped into focus. A summer afternoon, sunlight pouring through lace curtains, and the faint scent of eucalyptus in the air. The same scent filling my living room now. I blinked against the cradle, my heart thudding. That memory wasn't fully clear, but it felt real. I couldn't have been more than 10 years old in that fragment, lying on my stomach, someone's hands gently rubbing my back. I remembered laughter, not mine, but an older voice speaking in low, comforting tones. I tried to push the thought away. My mind was probably just blending the scent and sensation into some invented memory. But then he shifted to my shoulders and another flash hit me, sharper this time. This one was indoors too, but the lighting was dimmer, like a late afternoon. I remembered sitting on a couch, a soft blanket draped around me, and someone, I couldn't see their face, was rubbing my shoulders in a way that felt almost identical to what I was feeling now. The pressure, the rhythm, even the slight pause before switching sides. My stomach twisted. I wanted to open my mouth, to say something, to break this strange pull of the past. But I didn't. My voice felt trapped somewhere between my chest and throat. And the more I stayed silent, the more the flashes came, one after another, like a deck of old photographs being thumbed through at high speed. A hand placing a warm towel over my back. A voice saying, "Shh, just relax, you're safe." The faint, unmistakable glimmer of that same brown leather bracelet Daniel was wearing now. I swallowed hard, my breath uneven. Daniel didn't say anything. Maybe he didn't notice, or maybe he was too focused on his work. But each new touch seemed to dig up another piece of the past I hadn't realized was buried so deep. And with every fragment, a pattern began to form. It wasn't just déjà vu. These weren't random, harmless coincidences. My body knew this touch, and not from this afternoon alone. I kept my face hidden in the cradle, hoping my expression didn't betray the storm inside me. My mind was split in two, one half desperately clinging to the idea that this was an innocent gift from Melissa, the other half piecing together the unsettling truth that maybe, just maybe, this massage wasn't the first time Daniel had crossed into my personal space in this way. And then, just as his palm pressed firmly between my shoulder blades, I heard it, a low, almost whispered phrase that seemed to come from somewhere far away in my memory, just like before. My eyes flew open. The words hung in the air like smoke, faint yet impossible to ignore. Just like before. My pulse quickened, and for a moment I thought I'd imagined it, a trick of my restless mind weaving memories into reality. But then Daniel's hands paused, as if he realized what he'd just said. I lifted my head slightly from the face cradle, my voice quiet but edged. "What did you say?" He didn't look at me. "Nothing, just talking to myself," he replied too quickly, the kind of quick that screams cover up. The silence after that was deafening. My ears rang with my own heartbeat, and my skin, once warm under his hands, now felt like it was buzzing with static. I lay still, but inside, my thoughts were spinning. That phrase wasn't random. It was deliberate, personal, and it tied directly into the flashes that had been hitting me since the massage began. "Before?" I asked again, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you mean, before?" Daniel shifted his weight behind me, the creak of the floorboards sounding too loud. "You're tense," he said instead, dodging the question. "Let me finish your lower back. You'll feel better." But his avoidance only confirmed what I already suspected: there was a before. As he resumed, my mind clawed at the edges of those memories, trying to pull them into the light. I remembered being younger, smaller, lying in a room that smelled of the same eucalyptus oil, my shoulders being kneaded in that same rhythm, and that same voice, Daniel's, murmuring in a tone just like this one. I had never thought much of it before. Maybe because at the time, it had been framed as innocent. Or maybe because my mind had locked it away, deciding I didn't need to remember. But now, here it was, bubbling up, refusing to be buried again. Finally, I couldn't hold it in. "Daniel, did you?" My voice trailed off, unsure how to form the question without shattering something between us. He froze for the briefest second, then leaned forward so his voice was close to my ear. "Some things are better left in the past," he said quietly. "It's easier that way." The words hit me like cold water. They weren't a denial, and that was the problem. I stayed still, though every muscle in my body screamed to get up, to face him, to demand answers. But part of me was afraid. Afraid of what he might say. Afraid that the truth would confirm what my body already knew. In that moment, the massage was no longer about relaxation. It was a slow, deliberate unveiling, and Daniel had just admitted, in his own way, that there was something to uncover. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear it. I finally pushed myself up from the massage table, the sheet sliding down my shoulders as I turned to face him. My voice shook, but it was steady enough to cut through the thick air between us. No, Daniel. You don't get to say something like that and leave it hanging. What happened before? For a moment, he just stood there, one hand still holding the small bottle of oil, the other pressed against his thigh as if grounding himself. His eyes flickered toward the floor, then back to me. You really don't remember, he asked, his tone carrying both disbelief and a hint of something darker, almost relief that I had to ask. Bits and pieces of memory collided in my mind, too jagged to piece together yet. I shook my head slowly, though part of me knew that wasn't entirely true. Daniel exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of his neck. It was years ago. You were young. Your mom had gone out for the evening. You'd hurt your arm, said you couldn't sleep because it ached. I offered to help. I stared at him, my pulse pounding so loud it drowned out the quiet hum of the heater. Help, I repeated, my voice flat. He nodded, but his gaze didn't meet mine. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. I thought. I don't know, I thought it was comforting. Maybe I crossed a line. Maybe? He stopped himself, biting the inside of his cheek like the words had slipped further than he intended. That one word, maybe, split my world in two. Suddenly, the memories weren't blurry anymore. The flashes from earlier came back with brutal clarity, the warmth of his hands, the way he lingered too long, the low voice telling me to relax. Back then, I'd been too young to question it. I'd believed it was care. Now, I could see it for what it really was, a violation hidden under the mask of comfort. I took a step back, wrapping the sheet tighter around me, my throat burning. You did cross a line, I said, my voice breaking. You don't get to decide what I remember or how it felt. You took something from me without asking. Daniel's jaw tightened. I never meant to hurt you, he said, but his words were hollow, like a script he'd repeated in his head for years. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't look away. You did hurt me. And the worst part? You thought you could just show up here, do this again, and pretend it was nothing. He didn't answer. His silence was louder than any confession. And in that silence, the truth solidified, the truth my body had known long before my mind could catch up. This massage hadn't just uncovered a memory. It had uncovered the reality of who Daniel really was, and the fact that my family's so-called closeness had been built on a foundation of secrets no one wanted to speak about. And now I had no choice but to speak. The moment Daniel stepped back, I grabbed my robe from the couch and wrapped it around myself, the soft fabric doing little to shield me from the raw, electric sting under my skin. My hands trembled as I tied the belt, but my voice, though shaky, came out firm. You need to leave, I said. He didn't argue right away. Instead, he stood there, his expression flickering between guilt and defensiveness. It's not as simple as you think, he muttered. I let out a bitter laugh. Simple? You think there's anything complicated about you crossing a line with me when I was a kid? Or showing up here like this? My voice cracked on the last word, but I pushed through it. Daniel ran a hand over his jaw, his eyes avoiding mine. Your mom, she wouldn't understand. I froze. Does she know? He hesitated, just long enough for the answer to be obvious. She knows. Parts, he admitted finally. We agreed it was best not to dredge up the past. For everyone's sake. That hit harder than anything he'd said so far. My own mother, the person who was supposed to protect me, had known something. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to keep it quiet. Enough to protect him instead of me. It was like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. My childhood memories rearranged themselves in my head, all the little moments when my mom's mood would shift if Daniel's name came up, the way she'd subtly steer conversations away from certain topics. It had never been coincidence. You both decided my silence was more convenient than my truth, I said, my voice low and trembling. Daniel flinched, but still didn't move toward the door. I'm not proud of what happened, he said. But it's been years. You've moved on. I thought, maybe this could be a way to what? I snapped. Erase it? Rewrite it? The tension in the room was suffocating, and every second he stayed made me feel smaller and smaller, like the powerless girl I had been back then. I refused to let that version of me win. I'm not that kid anymore, I said sharply. And I'm not carrying this secret for you or for her. I will tell her. And I don't care if it blows this family apart. For a moment, something like fear flickered across his face. He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. Get out, Daniel. Now. Finally, he picked up his bag, slinging it over his shoulder without another word. As he walked toward the door, he paused, his hand on the handle. You think the truth will set you free, he said quietly, without turning back. But it never does. It just changes the cage. The door clicked shut behind him, and I stood there in the heavy silence, my whole body trembling, not from fear anymore, but from the beginning sparks of rage and resolve. I didn't know exactly what would happen when I confronted my mother, but I knew this much. The truth wasn't going to stay buried any longer. The quiet after Daniel left was almost deafening. I stood there for a long time, still wrapped in my robe, staring at the closed door as if expecting him to knock again. But he didn't. Instead, I was left with the echo of his words, it just changes the cage. Maybe he was right. Maybe the truth wouldn't feel like freedom at first. But I also knew that keeping it locked inside would keep me trapped in a different way, one where shame and silence were the bars. I made myself move, step by step, toward the kitchen. My phone sat on the counter, its screen dark, but my reflection in it was sharp enough to catch the determination in my eyes. My fingers hovered over my mother's number. I wasn't ready for this conversation. Maybe I'd never truly be ready, but I couldn't carry this knowledge alone anymore. When she answered, her voice was warm, unsuspecting. Hey, honey. How are you? The lump in my throat made it hard to speak at first. I need to talk to you, I managed. About Daniel. About before. There was a pause, a long, telling pause, and then the sound of her sharp inhale. I don't think we should know, I cut her off, my voice steadier than I expected. We are going to talk about it. You've known something happened, and you let me grow up carrying it alone. That ends today. Her silence was heavier than any argument she could have made. I could almost hear the years of avoidance, the layers of denial she had wrapped herself in. Please, I said softly, my voice cracking now. Don't make me the only one who has to live with this truth. When she finally spoke, her tone was trembling. I thought I was protecting you. No, I whispered. You were protecting him. The conversation didn't end with apologies or instant healing. In fact, it ended with her saying she needed time to process, and me hanging up before I could lose the resolve I'd built. But it was done, the silence had been broken, and there was no going back. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the scent of eucalyptus still faint in the air. My body felt lighter and heavier all at once, lighter, because the secret was no longer mine alone, heavier, because I knew the fallout was just beginning. I didn't know what family would look like after this. I didn't know if my mother would ever fully face the truth, or if Daniel would disappear from our lives completely. But I did know one thing, I had chosen myself. And maybe that was the only kind of freedom I could hope for, not the absence of a cage, but the strength to break the lock myself. 102.